There's really good solutions that we could come up with when you talk about housing policy. But when we talk about real estate, and we talk about this potential $25,000 towards first-time home buyer down payment, that's not going to help. It's going to hurt.
All right, well, let's just dive right in, man. So the election is coming up very soon. How do you think that's going to affect real estate?
It's going to have a dramatic effect on real estate because there's two different philosophies going on right now. One is to try to hand out money to would-be home buyers, and the other philosophy is let's get a handle on inflation. So the question is, which one's better? And the answer is unequivocally 100%, 1,000% option B. We're not in a situation where we have a lack of buyers. There's a lot of willing buyers. They're just not going to buy at a 7% interest rate. And by giving $25,000 down payment to first-time home buyers, all that does is it prints more money. And when the government prints money, you pay for it. Nothing is free. And I'm trying to be unbiased about this, but I'm also just trying to have common sense. We printed something like $3 trillion during COVID.
Yeah, out of thin air.
That's why we're in this mess right now, because of inflation. If you remember during COVID, everything skyrocketed. Why? Because people were flush with cash. But here's the thing. They try to print their way out of something, but there's always a reckoning point. And the reckoning point right now is inflation, which means that's the reason the interest rates went higher. The reason the government, the Fed, raised rates is because we have to slow things down a bit. And what that does is it affects housing. It affects everything. But when we talk about real estate, we talk about this potential $25,000 towards first-time home buyer down payment, that's not going to help. It's going to hurt. We don't have a problem with buyer demand. We have a problem with buyers that are not willing to get into the market based on rate. And the only way you can control that is by lowering interest rates. And by doing so, you have to control inflation. My solution to some of this problem is something along these lines. We need to get more inventory out there. The more inventory we have and the more would-be sellers we have because of savings and benefits that they could receive through the government, the more people would be willing to sell their home and potentially even at a discount. And even if not a discount, we still can create more competition. It's just simple economics. The more homes that are available, the more pricing stabilizes. Plain and simple. My solution was, I have a couple. One of them is no tax on capital gains for your first $100,000. Not everyone would benefit from this. But guess what? On these $25,000 handouts and other things, you don't always qualify. But if there's a time to do it, it's now because there's more equity in housing than we've ever had in the history of America. So if we do no capital gains on your first $100,000 and your tax at ordinary income of say 34%, that means that you save $34,000 when you sell your home. And the second leg to that was as long as you sell it to a primary occupant.
Sure. So you're talking about, this is like the middle class. I mean, this is the average Americans that you're talking about.
Yeah. And so now, if you don't sell to a primary occupant, you miss out on that. So what that means is that Wall Street that buys single family houses, they're not going to be as competitive because their extra 10 grand or their cash offer isn't as lucrative as you getting a $35,000. Because remember, that's $100K in non-capital gains. That's just straight $35,000, $33,000 in your pocket. That will incentivize people to sell their home if we give them a time frame to do it, because they can capitalize on a significant amount of dollars, which I can then use towards my next down payment on a home instead of a stupid handout that you're going to give me for 25 grand that I'll have to pay back in the future anyway. We also could have solutions where based on the number of doors that you own, you would have to pay a tax on that. As an example, I got pushback from Forbes, a writer from Forbes. What I was saying is that we need to figure out a way that Wall Street can still play the game, but there's a cost to play the game because it's essentially monopolizing the market when they have cash and they're buying as many single family homes as they can. And his argument to me was they only own 3.5% of the single family homes in America. And my argument to him is that's all homes. They don't buy all homes. They buy a certain box of homes, and the box of homes that they buy is first-time home buyer homes. They're not talking about townhouses and luxury homes. They don't buy those houses. So when you look at that 3.5, it's probably closer to 17 to 18% of those specific type of properties, which is what the average American is looking to buy. Well, that's a big problem. So my solution was this. We can have twofold. One, if you carry a certain number of units in your portfolio, you get a tax on that. Got to think about that when you're underwriting those houses. The other thing I said was we can incentivize them if they offload a certain percentage of their portfolio every year. So if you own 100,000 single family homes, and let's say that if you sell 10% of what you hold yearly, let's give you a tax incentive. Because the problem with them hoarding these houses is they're never going to release those houses. They're going to hold them forever and rent them out. Let's find ways to make it harder to purchase through underwriting based on a tax that you would have. have, or let's make it easier to offload the portfolio every year and make that part of the game plan, because instead of you paying any type of capital gains or corporate tax on whatever you purchased, as long as you offload 8 to 10% of that inventory, we're actually going to give you a tax benefit to make you more money on those houses,
Right.
so long as you sell them to a primary occupant. There's really good solutions that we could come up with when you talk about housing policy.
It's a critical time. It's definitely a critical time.
Yeah. But for real estate, it's not even a question. It's Trump, period. And honestly, for almost everything, it's Trump. Sorry. It's just the truth.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. It's just the truth. It's just the truth.